Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this week's Brand Yourself webinar. My name's Sabrina. I'm on the marketing team here at Brand Yourself. And today we're going to cover protecting your privacy and private information on the web. So definitely a very relevant topic and a very important one. As always, some quick housekeeping stuff. Feel free to follow along with our Twitter handle at Brand Yourself, as well as ask any questions that you might have. You can use it using the go to webinar panel on the right. Just type in the question and we'll get to it at the end. All right, let's kick it off. So more than ever, online privacy and protecting your private information is so important, and it seems to be growing by the day in terms of its importance and that you have an awareness of what's going on around your online information, where it's being shared, who it's being shared with, and ultimately how to protect yourself and safeguard your identity on the web. A large reason for the why this is becoming so relevant is I'm sure you're seeing all over the news is just simply the rise in hacks and data breaches. And this is essentially, hackers, whether they be individuals or groups that are looking for some sort of to gain something out of it, will hack a company or a source of information, and they'll either hold that data hostage. So they'll say, hey, we've hacked your X million number of users. We're going to hold it hostage unless you do X, or they simply release it. And, the psychology around why some of these people do what they do, we could talk for hours about, but the reality of it is that it keeps happening. It's more and more frequent, so we need to really protect ourselves. And you'll see here, it's truly happening to a number of different sites. And, there are multiple hacks happening each year, even each month. Hundreds and millions of people's information are being released out into the web. So, we live our entire lives online. So you really have to take a step back. And if you want to understand the importance of it, is you need to imagine if your entire internet history was exposed, and you need to approach it in that way. What if someone was able to hack the appropriate parties and anyone could find out everything you searched for, everything you bought online, every website you visited, even every single email that you wrote someone, whether it was in confidence or one-on-one, is now exposed out on the web. And it sounds scary and a little melodramatic when you think about it, but there is a reality to it, and it really is a reason for why we need to protect ourselves going forward. So the first thing I'm going to cover is how to find out if your info was actually even compromised to begin with. And there's a few ways that you can go about it. Obviously, one would be a quick internet search of your name, but fortunately there are a number of ways that you can quickly take a look at this information. The first is a site called Have I Been Pwned? And basically what they've done is they've aggregated some of the top breaches. So if there's a breach out there, they're on top of it in terms of reporting what breach happened, how many accounts or email addresses were actually compromised, and how to check if your email address was part of that hack. So it's definitely a useful site. If you can give them your email address, and they'll basically check it against all of the lists of email addresses that they have for all of these breaches, and they'll notify you if you're actually on one of them. If you're uncomfortable for whatever reason in terms of giving them your email address, they do have a list of the breaches, so you could check it periodically and say, hey, I use Dropbox, or I use LinkedIn or Yahoo, and you can go ahead and make sort of an assumption that your email address was compromised. Our tool will also help you out if you have information about you in search results. So if you're not already using the tool in terms of identifying what's out there about you online, I definitely recommend it. We'll basically keep tabs on search results for you and let you know if your name is appearing in a number of different types of results that we typically flag as negative. So it's your usual stuff that you might consider, like complaints, negative reviews, if you have bad press, if there's a legal record or court document that's released with your name attached, any instances of revenge porn or blogging, sites like that. But we also look for exposed private information. So I'm sure you've come across these sites like White Pages or Spokio or Intellius. These are essentially, think of the phone book, but online. And what they do is they scrape the web for public information about people. And it can include, where you live, known addresses, your age, telephone numbers. Depending on your position in your career, it might also include where you work, as well as a salary range. So there's these sites out there that contain private information that are out there. So we'll identify and let you know that you're on them. So I definitely recommend that, signing up or leveraging Brand Yourself in that way if you aren't already. So those are just some 2 easy ways that you can check if you've actually been hacked. But what happens if you find out if your information's been compromised? And unfortunately, the reality of it is if you have any sort of account out there, you probably have fallen into an internet breach. Now, there's no extreme cause for concern, but you should be aware of a few things that you should do when you find out that your information's been compromised. The first thing first is just change your passwords. Now, this could include the password that you actually used for the site. So for example, if a site is hacked, let's say, LinkedIn was recently hacked. If your LinkedIn's hacked, you want to change the password for the email address that you use to sign into LinkedIn. So change that password, and as well as any passwords that are associated with the email address that's involved with the breach, especially if you're using the same one. And then as just a best practice, you should be changing your passwords routinely anyway. And I'll go into it a little bit more later on in the webinar, but constantly changing your passwords is the first line of defense in terms of protecting yourself against these breaches. Because if the information is released with your email address and password, obviously if you change it regularly, then you vastly minimize the risk of someone accessing your actual password in one of these data breaches. The next thing that you want to do is just do a quick check with your bank and your credit card company. And you don't have to go crazy. Look at your online statement. If you have alerts for charges set up, I know I have that. So through my bank, I have a texting alert set up that whenever I charge something, it just sends me a quick text and lets me know, hey, this purchase went through. And it's a good checkpoint for myself so that if anyone were to actually get info or get my banking info, if someone charged it, I would know instantly. But you don't have to set up the real-time alerts, but just do a basic look at your statements. Just make sure nothing crazy is going on. You can also call your bank or your credit card company and say, hey, I believe that my information was compromised. Could you put a note on my account? And typically that just means that they might freeze your account if something crazy pops up. If they suspect that your account is at risk, they might, change your credit card number, issue you a new one. So just do some basic checking. It's a great way to just make sure that no monetary damages happened. Another site that you can use is Safe Shepherd. And what they do is they help remove you from some of those public listings that I was talking about. So White Pages, Intellius, any sort of public directory online that has private information, they can assist you in removing it from that. So hopefully down the road, it'll just help minimize how much information is about you on the web. And then the next thing and final thing that you want to do in an ongoing capacity is building a positive online presence. And that's really the bread and butter of what Brand Yourself helps you do and what we've talked about in most of our webinars. So I won't get too in depth because we typically cover it pretty in depth. So if you want more information on this, I definitely recommend checking out our blog, or I'm happy to answer any specific questions at the end. But the basic of it and the basic concept is that if you're actively maintaining a positive online presence and managing your reputation online, then when something, damaging like a data breach that you might get roped into pops up, it helps minimize that damage. And it also puts you in a much better spot for cleanup down the road. So it goes back to that 3-step process we always talk about, where you want to build positive content about yourself. So personal websites, professional profiles. You want to optimize them for search engines. So all the steps that our tool helps guide you through, you want to optimize your sites and profiles so they have the best chance of ranking in search results when someone Googles your name. And then you want to update your content going forward. So keeping your sites active, your profiles active. This is stuff like activity on social media, posting content, blogging, rich media, and all of the ongoing maintenance. So as long as you're maintaining that online presence, it's one branch of this, damage control aspect that you don't have to worry about. And it definitely helps to mitigate anything further down the road. So also focus on that as well. The next thing that you want to do is protect your current information. Obviously, the first thing that you want to do is protect your passwords. Your password is the key to everything, in a sense, your password and your email combined together. Use a secure password and change it often. So as I was saying earlier, it's no longer a good practice to have the same password for everything. Although it's definitely easier, it can cause a lot more headaches down the road, especially when that one password is now compromised. Another thing about passwords is gone are kind of the days of the password where it's easy for you to remember. So making your password Fido after your childhood dog is probably not your best option right now. The more complex the password is, the better. So include numbers, special characters, keep them long, and again, keep them unique. So from site to site, you should be having unique passwords. Fortunately, there are a number of tools to help you out with that. So there's password generators, and there's also password management tools. So the password generator is exactly what it sounds like. It'll help generate a secure password for you it's obviously unique. They're not generating it for more than one person, but you can then go ahead and use it, and you can take comfort in knowing that it was generated in a way that makes it very hard to crack. So they're typically very long. They typically have a lot of, different lowercase, uppercase letters, numbers, and in some instances, special characters. So definitely use, a tool for that, as well as a general password management tool. And two that I have here listed, LastPass and 1Password, are two services or tools that do both for you. So they'll help you generate passwords, and they also store them. If you're not familiar with them, essentially the way that they work is you have a master password to I'll use 1Password as an example since I actually use it. You'll have 1Password to that. And it's essentially, it lives as an app on either your phone or your computer, and it stores all of your information, and it's all encrypted, and but it is in one place. So if you're concerned about remembering, 20 something passwords, since that seems like what we need now based on all of the types of profiles and things that we create, it'll store it all securely for you in one spot, and you'll be able to access it. So you don't ever have to be like, oh, what was that password for my LinkedIn? Oh, what was the password for my online banking? It'll store everything for you. And then, like I said, it'll also help you generate passwords. So if you're a little stuck in terms of, creating 20 plus unique passwords, they'll be able to help you out. So I definitely recommend trying something like that. And like I said, as a best practice, I would get in the habit of every few months just changing all your passwords out. Maybe set a calendar invite for yourself, the first of the month, and just clear out your passwords, reset them, just so they're not easily hackable. Another aspect that I want to talk about is safe browsing. So one way, obviously the password is the bread and butter of protecting your online identity, but a way that companies and even search engines understand more and more about their users is they look at their internet history and their browsing behaviors. And they use that information to typically tailor experiences for you. So I'm sure everyone has, gone to a website and maybe shopped around for gloves, and they decide, hey, I don't want the gloves anymore, and I'm just going to check my Facebook. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to see ads for these gloves. So that's a retargeting strategy that a lot of companies use they basically understood that, or the glove company understood that you wanted those gloves, and for whatever reason, you decided not to purchase them. So they're trying to retarget you or remarket to you by showing you ads for those gloves. It's definitely effective, but they're taking that information and understanding more about you. So if you truly want to protect yourself in terms of removing yourself from the grid, essentially, by data standpoints, you want to practice some safe browsing. So one way to go about that, and we've talked about this before, is incognito mode or private browsing. And basically what that does is it strips away your browsing history and the things that you've done previously in search engines. And it essentially wipes the slate clean, so it's not influencing or impacting your search results. And I've talked to you guys about this before when it came to understanding more about how your search results look to other people. So I'll use the same example. When you're Googling yourself, you might notice that if you're dealing with a negative, oh my God, the negative's all of a sudden on the first page. All I see are all these negative stuff, all this information about me. And the reason for that is search engines are understanding your behavior, and they're trying to present to you search results that they think you'll find relevant. So if you're searching for yourself all the time to check on this negative result, they're going to show you much different search results that are more tailored to what you are looking for than if I just searched you on a random day. Incognito mode and private browsing removes all that history and gives you a much cleaner picture of what other people are seeing in search results. So it's not being influenced by your behavior. And from a privacy standpoint, it's essentially not using, your cookies or your private browsing to influence how ads are being given to you, how, search engines are targeting you, and all of that fun stuff. Also, I would recommend, in addition to the incognito mode, is just periodically clearing your cookies and your browser history. It'll definitely, like I said before, it helps minimize, the instances of advertising and customized search results and all of that stuff that it's not necessarily putting your information at risk, but you should be aware that every time you search for something, people are using that information to make, um, to provide you with a custom experience. So if you want to remove yourself from that ability, then things like incognito mode, private browsing, clearing your cookies, all of that will help. Also, I would recommend, downloading an ad blocker. It will, obviously it stops the annoyance of the ads, but it also removes yourself from that equation of people using information to serve you ads, essentially. So that is primarily what I wanted to cover. So I wanted to turn it over to some Q&A, and I already see here that you have a few questions brewing, so I'm more than happy to get to those. Before I do want to always offer a free consultation at Brand Yourself to help guide you through your online reputation and ways that you can improve it. So if you have any questions, or if you think that we could be able to help out in terms of our services, I definitely recommend scheduling that consultation. You can do so with the link bit.ly/BY consult. You can send me an email at sclark@BrandYourself.com, or you can tweet at us and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But first and foremost, I want to jump into some questions. So the first question I have here is surrounding private browsing, and the person saying, when I search for myself, I tend to see different search results from different computers. Is this because I'm not using incognito? Okay, so that's definitely what is going on. So as I just spoke about, search engines are using your behavior to present different experiences. And in a way, it's to try to provide you with more of a relevant experience. So I'll use an example of ordering pizza. So if I'm in New York City and I want to look up a pizza place and I Google pizza, it's going to show me pizza places that are based in New York City. And perhaps even pizza places that I've looked at their website before will rank a little bit higher because they understand that it's a little bit more relevant to me. If I use incognito browsing, there's still some of that geo element there, but it's not going to be influenced by my previous search history. So the same exact thing is going on with your name. So if you're searching your name over and over and over and over again from your one computer and your one browser, it's going to you'll notice that you'll start to see your stuff probably ranking higher in search engines. Now, if you go, on a business trip and you're at the hotel computer and you decide to search yourself for the first time, it's going to show much different search results because they're not personalized to your previous experiences. So I would definitely recommend, as a best practice, to use incognito browsing. One, if you're looking at an online reputation management standpoint and want to check on your personal search results. And two, as more of a privacy issue, if you want to, remove yourself from some of those customized advertising things. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. I'm more than happy to answer any more that you might have. So definitely feel free to type them in the question box. The next question I have is surrounding password generators. And they said, how can I be sure that the password generated is secure? Okay, so one thing that I will say about passwords is, in theory, you could probably never create a password that is 100% secure. However, there are things that you can do that will definitely help and make it way more secure than if you made your password Apple for your computer or something like that. The more you're able to diversify the password, so making sure that there's a combination of uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers. If the site allows it, using symbols like exclamation points or the @ sign. All of those things, the more complex that you can make them, the more secure that they become. And you'll notice with password generators, if you've ever used one, they're not creating like a password that says, dog 321, which isn't all that secure, even though it has some numbers in it. It's going to create a password that's like X4 3 ZXQRA34 TZ, for an example. So they're much longer than probably what you would create for yourself. They're way more complex. They're essentially at random. So there's nothing really tied to you that would lead someone to be able to crack it. So for those reasons is why I would definitely recommend a password generator. Of course, if you're uncomfortable, using a password that's been generated for you, then I definitely recommend that you apply just the principles that I spoke about. So changing it up, I would definitely recommend not using actual words. I wouldn't recommend using a word that is tied to the site that you signed up for. In fact, some sites are preventing you from creating a password that has their name in it. And what I mean by that is creating, let's say for your LinkedIn, you create your password as LinkedIn123. Don't do that. I also, would just attempt to, you should randomize it as much as possible, and that will help make it more secure. And of course, having them unique from site to site. Okay. The next question that I have is how do I know that the password manager database is secure? So, obviously, as with anything, you want to do a little digging. The sites that I recommended to you, they're all encrypted. They take as much precaution as possible to secure their sites. There's different authentication steps for you to take to actually even to get into your own account with them. So they definitely are more secure than your average, probably your average means of keeping your passwords. So I definitely would not be hesitant in terms of using them. Obviously, it is a technology, and take what I just said with a grain of salt. But they do use methods of encryption to ensure that your passwords are as safe as possible with them. So the next question I have is, private browsing will keep my browser software from remembering my searches. How do I keep Google from remembering my searches? So private browsing and incognito mode will prevent Google from remembering your specific searches. One thing I will say is if you use a Google account, so if you have a Gmail account, I would recommend logging out of it before, searching. And in that way, you can ensure that it's not being tied to search engines. So 2 things I would recommend to do there is sign out of your Google account. So if you have a Gmail, and use private browsing, and that will prevent Google from remembering your specific searches. Okay, so I have another question, which is regarding VPNs, which I haven't touched upon in the webinar. And the question was if I recommend the use of one. So essentially, a VPN is a private network, and it's an ability for you to essentially, hide and or change the IP address from which you are working from. Companies use them for their own secure networks, other people use them for, browsing reasons because they want to feel 100% secure. So VPNs are what I would call an advanced tactic. You can definitely use them. I've used them before. There's one, pardon my language, it's called hide my ass. And essentially what it does is it allows you to leverage a different IP address and masks your true location from where you're browsing. I would recommend that you could use one if that was your prerogative. Keep in mind it is an advanced tactic, so you don't have to use one and still operate safely. It's more of another security measure that you can use for your own private use. So definitely I would recommend it if you wanted to go down that route. Okay, so someone had a question that wanted me to clarify 2 questions ago, which was the private browsing as well as logging out of your Google account. So private browsing, essentially, when you have an incognito mode or private browsing, it's preventing the search engine from using information that it already knows about you. I would recommend, if it sounded like this person was concerned that using, a Google account could be impacting their Google results. As a security measure, I would recommend also logging out of your Gmail before doing a search result, even if it's in incognito or private browsing, if you wanted to be 100% sure that it's not being influenced by your Gmail. If from an average, day-to-day searching standpoint, you don't have to log out of your Gmail account. So essentially, if you're, let's say you really want to check on the status of your personal search results, I would just log out of your Gmail account as an extra measure. But from a security standpoint, you probably don't have to log out of it if you're just doing your day-to-day browsing, as long as you're using a private or an incognito browser. I hope that helps with the clarification. I hope that helped with some of the clarification there, but please do post a follow-up question if you would like. So, okay, so I have another question here, and this is going back to some of the retargeting stuff that I was speaking about. And the person's asking, so I buy some underwear online and the company ads start to pop up on my website. Or I purchase a gift for someone and start getting ads featuring the item, which I've already bought. And I don't want this to be visible on my computer if the recipient might see it. Is this what ad blocker would solve? Incidentally, I never understand why they send ads for stuff I have bought. Okay, so those are a few questions in there. So first, I just want to give another overview of kind of what's happening in that instance. So the site that's selling the underwear is using retargeting ads. So essentially what it does is when you hit that site and you are searching, for the underwear, it is placing a cookie on, it's essentially placing a cookie on your browsing history. And so when you go then to another site that allows for retargeting, it will then display the ad for the underwear company. Now, not everyone is seeing the ad for the underwear company. So you mentioned that it's popping up on your website. So not every person that hits your website is going to see the underwear ad. They're going to see the ad that's relevant to them. So essentially, it's ad space that's on these sites. So let's say you're on Amazon and you're looking at Brita filters, and you go elsewhere, and all of a sudden, you're seeing Brita filters on this one website. Not everyone in the world is seeing Brita filters. They're seeing an ad that's customized to them and their browsing history. So you don't have to worry that people aren't seeing what you're searching for. It's a tailored experience for you. A way to block this would be to use incognito browsing. So that will prevent the cookie from being placed to be able to serve you that ad in future browsing sessions. Ad blockers will also prevent those ads from showing altogether. So it essentially erases the ad for you. But the private browsing will ensure the cookie's never been placed in the first place. So if you want to be extra cautious, I would do both. I would use the private browsing as well as the ad blocker. Your last little tidbit about why they keep sending ads for stuff that they bought is essentially they just never place the proper code on their checkout page that would indicate to them that you actually went ahead and bought it. Or you might have bought it on a different, browser or using a different device that essentially didn't tie it to your experience, if that makes sense. I'm happy to clarify that further if there's any questions there. I know that it can be a little of a complex answer. Okay, so the clarification, it seems like you had some clarification with that question. It's you just don't want the ads to appear on your computer if at work or where others might see your specific computer. Okay, so yes, I would use the ad blocker, and that would essentially prevent any ads from being served to you. And you can also use the private browsing to ensure that down the road it's not being presented to you as well. So someone's asking if I'm searching for embarrassing or confidential stuff, should I use incognito? So that is your call, but I would recommend it if you didn't want it to show up in your browsing history and you didn't want to start having ads and things like that served to you that's related to whatever you might be looking for. So if you want to be safe, I would definitely use incognito. Okay. So it looks like we might have gotten to all of the questions. If I wasn't able to get to yours, my email address is right there. It is sclark@BrandYourself.com. Definitely feel free to shoot me an email with any follow-up questions that you might have. And feel free to schedule that consultation if you have any further questions that you think we will be able to help out with. Thank you again for joining me on this webinar. I hope you found it informative, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.